2025, investors placed a value of roughly $3.2 billion on the Aston Martin Formula One team. There was one strange detail. Aston Martin had not won a single Grand Prix since returning to Formula One under that name. Not one. The team finished 7th in the 2025 Constructors' Championship, and yet a minority stake transaction valued the operation at more than $3 billion. So what exactly are investors buying? Because if an F1 team were valuable mainly because it wins races, a team struggling in the midfield should not resemble a multi-billion-dollar sports asset. But Formula One has changed. The car is still racing for points. The company behind it is competing in a very different game. It owns one of a tiny number of positions inside a global championship, producing billions in revenue. It receives money from the sport itself. It sells sponsorship inventory to companies that care about exposure far beyond the podium, and a financial cost cap has made it harder for the richest teams to simply spend everyone else into oblivion. A Grand Prix victory lasts roughly 2 hours. A place on the Formula One grid can generate economic value every day of the year. And that explains how an F1 team can become worth billions before it becomes capable of winning. But it also reveals the weakness underneath those valuations, because the most valuable thing the team owns may not really belong to the team at all. From the outside, Formula One looks like one of the simplest businesses imaginable. Build the fastest car, hire the best drivers, win races, collect trophies, and the better the team performs, the more valuable it becomes. There is obviously truth in that. Championship position affects how Formula One distributes money to teams. Winning creates media attention. Successful drivers attract fans. Sponsors want their logos on cars that appear at the front of the television broadcast rather than disappearing behind them. But that explanation creates a problem. Only one team can win the Constructors' Championship each season. Most teams will not win a race. Yet all of them still employ hundreds of people, operate sophisticated factories, carry major sponsorship portfolios, and continue attracting owners willing to invest enormous amounts of capital. The economic question, therefore, cannot simply be, how many trophies does this team own? It has to be, what does owning an F1 team give you, even when the trophy cabinet stays empty? The first answer is scarcity. Think about almost any ordinary business. If restaurants become extremely profitable, competitors can open more restaurants. If hotels become attractive investments, developers can build more hotels. If a clothing brand discovers a profitable niche, dozens of rivals can copy it. Formula One does not work like that. There are 11 teams competing in the 2026 championship after Cadillac became the first new entry in a decade. Getting onto that grid required years of negotiation, regulatory approval, and enormous financial commitment. That scarcity changes the asset. You are not buying a collection of racing cars. Those cars become obsolete constantly. You are not merely buying the factory. Someone can build another factory. You are buying access to an economic system that is extremely difficult to enter. The clearest evidence came from Cadillac. Its 2026 entry reportedly involved a $450 million anti-dilution payment, designed to compensate the existing teams because one more participant means Formula One's shared commercial economics must be divided among more competitors. Think about what that implies. Before Cadillac scores a point, before it wins a race, and before anyone knows whether its car will be competitive, simply joining the club already has enormous economic consequences. Existing grid positions therefore behave less like ordinary racing operations and increasingly like scarce sports assets. Not identical to an NFL franchise, not legally the same thing, but economically, some of the logic is beginning to look familiar. Restricted supply, shared league revenue, central commercial rights, and protection against uncontrolled spending. That last change may be the most important. For decades, The obvious way to become faster in Formula One was to spend more money, more engineers, more aerodynamic development, more testing, more manufacturing capacity, more people solving increasingly tiny problems. That made competitive success expensive and financial survival even harder. If the leading team could spend hundreds of millions more than a smaller rival, the weaker team faced a vicious choice: accept being slow, or spend money it might never recover trying to catch up. That is terrible economics for an investor, because every extra dollar generated by sponsorship or commercial revenue can disappear immediately into the race car. A business with unlimited competitive spending does not necessarily become more profitable when revenue rises. It simply discovers a more expensive way to compete. The cost cap changed that logic. For 2026, the FIA set the base team cost cap at $215 million, subject to indexation and certain race count adjustments. Importantly, this is not a total company budget. It applies to defined relevant costs under the financial regulations. The headline figure rose from $135 million in 2025, partly because the 2026 regulations changed the cost environment substantially. The exact number matters less than the mechanism. There is now a wall. A rich owner can still build facilities and spend in areas that sit outside the regulated perimeter where permitted. But the core competitive arms race has boundaries, and that transforms the investment case. Suppose two teams each receive another $30 million of commercial income. In the old model, both might immediately spend the $30 million trying to gain another tenth of a second. Nobody becomes richer. The cars just become more expensive. Under a spending cap, commercial revenue can grow faster than the amount the team is permitted to deploy into certain performance-related costs. That creates the possibility of operating leverage. The economic ceiling on racing expenditure does not automatically create profit, but it changes the relationship between revenue and cost. A team that becomes more popular can sign more sponsors. Formula One can negotiate more valuable media contracts. The central prize pool can rise. Hospitality and licensing can grow. And the team no longer has exactly the same freedom to consume every additional dollar chasing lap time. That is one reason investors now look differently at the grid. They are not simply asking, can this car beat Ferrari? They are asking, what happens if Formula One revenues continue growing while team spending remains disciplined? That is an investment question, not a racing question. And Formula One's own numbers explain the excitement. In 2025, Formula One generated approximately $3.873 billion of revenue. About $3.086 billion came from its primary revenue sources, while another $787 million came from other activities, including hospitality, logistics, licensing, and related businesses. Formula One then made approximately $1.4 billion in team payments, excluding separate Concorde incentive payments. That was up from about $1.266 billion the previous year. That money is not divided equally. Performance matters. The 2026 Concorde Agreement ties the prize fund to Formula One economics and allocates most of the distributable pool according to constructors' championship performance, while also recognizing factors such as longer-term success and heritage. Ferrari receives a separate heritage-related share. So finishing first is financially better than finishing ninth. But ninth is not zero. That distinction is crucial. The team does not need to win a race before it participates in the commercial system. It needs to remain a Formula One team. That makes championship performance one variable inside the valuation rather than the entire valuation. Now look at the car. Almost every visible surface is commercial inventory. The side pod, the front wing, the halo, the race suit, the garage, team clothing, digital content, hospitality, driver appearances, Technical partnerships. A Formula One team can sell access to a global audience without owning the television network distributing that audience. Formula One does the difficult part collectively. It organizes the championship, sells media rights, signs promoters, creates the broadcast product, and builds the global platform. The team then monetizes its own slice of that attention through commercial partnerships. Liberty Media itself identifies sponsorship as a substantial revenue source for the teams, and sponsors are not always paying only for race victories. They may be buying technology positioning, luxury, engineering credibility, executive hospitality, content, brand association, access to customers, or simply a logo repeatedly appearing inside one of the most internationally distributed sports in the world. A team running 5th can still offer all of those products. A team running 10th can still offer some of them. Winning improves the inventory. It does not create the inventory. The grid position creates it. This is what makes Aston Martin such a useful example. The team returned under the Aston Martin name in 2021. It had flashes of genuine competitiveness, especially Fernando Alonso's string of podiums in 2023, but it did not win a Grand Prix. It then fell back to 5th in the championship in 2023 and 2024, before finishing 7th in 2025. Under an old-school interpretation of racing economics, that is not the profile of an extraordinary asset. No championship, no race victory, midfield performance. Yet in 2025, a minority transaction placed the team's value at around £2.4 billion, roughly $3.2 to $3.3 billion. That valuation was not a payment for trophies already won. It reflected expectations about what the operation could become and what the grid position already represented. Aston Martin had a modern Silverstone headquarters, a globally recognized brand, long-term commercial partnerships, an entry in a rapidly growing championship, and the possibility that future sporting performance could improve the economics further. The investor is therefore buying two things at once: the cash-generating commercial platform that exists now, and an option on sporting success later. If the team starts winning, sponsorship value can rise, prize payments can improve, fan engagement can deepen, and the asset may become even more desirable. But the investment does not have to begin at zero while everyone waits for the first trophy. That is the crucial change. 2 years earlier, another transaction gave us an earlier snapshot. In 2023, Renault sold a 24% stake in Alpine Racing Limited for €200 million to an investor group including Otro Capital, Redbird Capital Partners, and Maximum Effort Investments. The deal valued Alpine's F1 operation at around $900 million. Alpine described the investment not simply as funding for faster cars, but as support for commercial development, brand growth, and sporting ambitions. That wording matters. Professional investors were not buying a Sunday afternoon result. They were buying equity. Race results disappear from the timing screen after a few hours. Equity participates in the long-term value of the organization. And when you compare transactions across Formula One, you begin to see why the sport attracts private capital. Investors are betting that the grid itself is becoming more valuable. None of this means results are irrelevant. A team that finishes last forever has problems. It receives less performance-related money. Its cars appear less often at the front of broadcasts. Elite drivers may prefer competitors. Sponsors can demand more value elsewhere. Fans eventually get tired of promises. Sporting success is therefore a commercial accelerator. But the mistake is assuming it is the entire engine. Consider two different assets. Team A wins several races but operates in a sport with shrinking audiences, uncontrolled costs, and unlimited new competitors. Team B rarely wins, but operates inside a growing global championship with restricted entry, revenue sharing, predictable commercial contracts, and regulated spending. The better racing team is not automatically the better investment. Investors value future cash flows. They value scarcity. They value predictable rules. And they value the ability to sell the asset later. Formula One increasingly offers all four. This is particularly important because many of Formula One's own major commercial agreements are long-term. Liberty says a significant majority of Formula One's race promotion, media rights, and sponsorship agreements require payments in advance and include annual increases over the life of the contracts. That creates visibility. A race may be chaotic. The commercial contract behind the race can be surprisingly boring, and investors love boring cash flows. The sport may produce a safety car, a thunderstorm, and 3 pit stop disasters on Sunday. The broadcaster still has a contract. The promoter still has a contract. The sponsor still has a contract. And under the Concorde structure, the teams participate in the resulting economics. The more predictable the central business becomes, the easier it becomes to value a team like a long-duration sports asset rather than an expensive racing hobby. That may be the biggest transformation of all. Formula One did not make racing predictable. It made the business around racing more predictable. A Formula One car is extraordinary technology. Financially, it is also temporary. The current car will be obsolete. The regulations will change. Parts will be redesigned. Drivers will leave. Engine partnerships will change. Engineers will move between teams. Yet the organization survives. That tells you where the durable value actually sits. It sits in the grid entry, the factory and technical capability, the people, commercial contracts, intellectual property, sponsor relationships, brand recognition, central Formula One distributions, and the expectation that the team will still be participating years from now. The car is the product everyone photographs. The durable asset is the institution producing the next car. But this creates one very important vulnerability. An F1 team does not independently control the system giving its grid position value. Formula One controls the championship's commercial rights. The FIA controls the regulatory framework. The Concorde Agreement governs the commercial relationship between the sport and the teams. Sponsors can leave. Broadcasters can renegotiate. Consumer attention can move somewhere else. And the cost cap rules themselves can change. The billion-dollar valuation therefore depends on something larger than the team. It depends on Formula One continuing to function as a scarce, growing, commercially disciplined ecosystem. That is the fatal weakness. If the sports audience shrinks significantly, sponsorship becomes less valuable. If central revenue stops growing, team distributions weaken. If uncontrolled spending returns, more revenue may disappear back into the arms race. If too many new teams enter without enough new revenue, existing shares of the commercial pool are diluted. And if an individual team becomes irrelevant for long enough, its own sponsors and fan base can weaken even while Formula One remains healthy. The valuation is protected by the ecosystem. It is also trapped inside it. This gives us two completely different versions of a midfield F1 team. The strong one may not win today, but it controls spending. It signs multi-year sponsors. It builds a recognizable identity. Its facilities are competitive. Its ownership is patient. It receives central distributions. It develops drivers and technical capability. And when the regulations eventually create an opportunity, it has the organization required to exploit it. That team can become more valuable before the stopwatch proves the investment thesis. The weak version simply burns money. Its sponsor roster changes constantly. Owners cover recurring losses. Facilities fall behind. Management turns over. The car remains slow. And there is no credible path from participation to sustainable economics. Both teams may finish seventh. Only one deserves a multi-billion-dollar valuation. That is why the standings cannot tell you what the company is worth. So why can an F1 team be worth billions without winning races? Because investors are not buying the previous Grand Prix. They are buying scarce access to the next decade of Formula One. They are buying a share of central economics, a global sponsorship platform, a cost-controlled competition, a recognizable sports brand, and the possibility that one of a very small number of grid positions becomes even more valuable as the championship grows. Winning still matters. It increases prize money, attention, and commercial power. But the trophy is no longer the entire business. The deeper asset is simply being inside the system. And that changes how you should look at every Formula One team. The race car is designed to become obsolete. The grid position is designed to survive it. Winning creates glory. Scarcity creates value.